I'll try not to spend too much time on this, but this is just yet another example. Big shout out to my team and Andrew, social media team, getting the story over to me because they know how passionate I am about this subject. Now, I would encourage you guys to have stuff on this channel as well as the Young Group of 5'9" Entertainment channel where I talk specifically about this. And for some people, it's the opposite. But as I've aged, I tend to gravitate towards games that have more some sort of skill gap and like difficulty. It doesn't matter if it's in a multiplayer setting of or cooperative setting or a single player set. It doesn't matter. I like the idea that I can't just mindlessly play this. Now some people, like I say, are the opposite. As they age, they want stuff easier because I have a job and it's not fun. I work all the time, and then when I come home, I just want to be mindless. It's like and have fun is what they say. Where for some of us, having fun is part of the struggle, or rather the fact that I have to adapt to the game and actually have to learn to play it instead of just having it carry me through it. It's actually fun, right? What's not fun is me just playing some mind-numbing game when I'm one-shotting everybody. Been very passionate about this. But listen to this. Yet again, here are the game journals doing exactly what it is that they've done. And this is what it says. Hogwarts Legacy needs to be accessible to a casual crowd. Now listen to what some of these things, what they're going to say. By its nature, Hogwarts Legacy is sure to attract a large crowd when it releases next year, and it needs to ensure accessibility to new gamers. This year will be over. People will know it, but thankfully there's plenty of look forward, blah, blah, blah. They talk about all these games. By far, one of the most anticipated games of those opening months is Hogwarts Legacy. It says when it released, yada, yada. But Hogwarts Legacy isn't just targeting a hardcore demographic. It's trying to grab attention from Wizard World fans, regardless of whether they've picked up a controller or not. And this is where it gets, again, same thing you expect from the games journals. Harry Potter is one of the biggest media franchises on the planet, though it has been over a decade since the last mainline movie came out. The Wizarding World has lived on through theme park attractions, yada, 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 yada. Hogwarts Legacy looks as if it'll offer an experience people have wanted for decades, putting players directly in the shoes of their own custom Hogwarts students as they attend classes, roam around the grounds, and battle magical foes. Over the last few years, Hogwarts Legacy has managed to pull a sizable audience despite controversy surrounding the creator, yada, 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 yada. This is a bunch of fluff. There are bound to be a vast number of Harry Potter fans jumping into Hogwarts Legacy purely for the brand recognition, some of whom may have never held a controller before. To keep that group happy, Hogwarts Legacy is going to have to make sure it's completely accessible to newcomers. This means that the game will need to have a clear, engaging tutorial and tentatively introduces new players to the general systems of controls. Every game, for the most part, has that. Hogwarts Legacy should also give players the option to access new tutorials whenever they're introduced to a spell or mechanic. The game's button input should also be intuitive as possible. One of the best ways Hogwarts Legacy can ensure the players of all skills enjoy the experience is providing plenty of difficulty options. Here we go again. At the start of the game, players should have the option to choose from a range of difficulties, with lowest being a story mode as in the other narrative-focused games. Though it should be made clear that this difficulty mode is expressly for newcomers, it also is important for Hogwarts Legacy to be as generally accessible as possible for people with disabilities. And I told y'all, when I talk about accessibility, you get these people who get all mad. Well, that's not what accessibility is in terms of like they talk about disabilities, and you'll hear me say something like I'm not talking about like colorblind setting or something like that, or having the ability to be able to map a controller to do certain things. They conflate the two issues. Games journals do it all the time, where they conflate accessibility like in difficulty with accessibility and disabilities. Obviously, they're not the exact same thing, but they will certainly use people with disabilities to assist them. Now, my issue is this. I disagree wholeheartedly with what that person is saying, and that is that this game has to absolutely do that. Keep in mind what we just saw win Game of the Year. And what you even if it hadn't have won, I think a lot of us would have agreed, no matter how you felt about the game, considering the what happened around it and how well it was. Even I had my criticisms, but that's Elden Ring, which is a game that, like other Souls games, doesn't go into the difficulty aspect, doesn't really hold your hand with how you advance through the story. And the games journals, we covered them, were griping about that. They were griping even about the Demon's Souls remake and saying that, well, it doesn't have a difficulty setting. Oh, my God. You see, the experience is the experience. And I think people forget from a mechanic perspective, like even just a sheer developmental perspective, just having difficulty options does not mean that your game is better. It doesn't even mean that you're going to have more people that are going to be engaged with your game. You need to give people, as a creative, the experience that you maybe have in your mind. Now, having a wide range of difficulties doesn't mean that you're making a more accessible, better game, because the game mechanics ultimately are going to be the game mechanics. And if you have to try to combat, this is why it gets cheap with how a lot of people do. This is why games like Souls don't even bother to do it, because not every game, let me say this, it's very difficult to have a game range in difficulty without having cheap elements of why that difficulty is better. Like, do the let's say enemies become like just more bullet sponges or more spongy or whatever? Are they smarter, more sophisticated? Like, and often it's done in a cheap way, and it usually it's just, okay, ramp up the amount of damage they do, and that's it. Like, it's cheap. But the thing that you end up having happen is that, well, that experience, and I've said this in games that I review, like playing a game on the hardest difficulty versus playing it on the lowest difficulty, in some cases can completely change the game experience, and it can be better in one aspect than it was before. And it shouldn't have to be that way, because this person, Games Journal, when you go on the games journalist mode and you put it on the easiest setting so you can get your reviews out and you can hurry up and get those out, hurry up and get the stream over with if you're one of those streamers, so you can get that video and your review out. You, of course, want it to be as short and easy as it realistically can. But they don't seem to ever think about the fact that, what if this ruins the experience that the devs are trying to give you? I disagree wholeheartedly. If the game's solid, it's solid, and people will adjust, just like what they did with Elden Ring. Now, yeah, you're right. It's a recognizable brand, but you don't have to make a crappy game just because it's a recognizable brand. And yes, you can ruin a game by trying to have too wide of a range of type of gamer that you're trying to take into consideration to play it. And this is the one negative thing, and I've discussed this many, many, many times. One negative thing about games becoming more popular, like, it's the industry. It's eclipsed. It's well beyond, let's say, what movies are in terms of the go-to form of entertainment. Gaming is where it's at. And with gaming, you have, because of that, a lot of people who aren't really gamers that are trying to play games, which that's awesome, right? But if you have to try to lure and really cater to the lowest common denominator, right? No matter how terrible of a gamer it is, you can, and we've seen it happen in many games before, ruin the experience for everybody else. Now, you'd hear the weirdos make the argument that, well, just because someone else, say if it's a single player game, just because someone else plays it on easy and you play it on hard, doesn't mean that, well, they're gonna crap on your experience. And it's like, that's not what it is that we're saying. It's more of that you could break a game by trying to have too many folks have access to it, in which it'll play bad, and you could see it playing bad because you're trying to have a wide perspective. Some games are able to pull it off. Most games aren't. And definitely when you start, and I don't know what the multiplayer aspirations are for Hogwarts, but definitely when you start to get into that element of it, well, it gets even more difficult. And to define tuning and all that sort of stuff, it gets even more difficult to try to just have it be for every single person. No, you make a game that is the game. Whether it has difficulties or not, don't shy away from not having difficulty, where it's just like no difficulty setting, where it's just the game is the game. But you make sure that the game obviously plays well. And yes, you want as many people to play it, but I am a firm believer, if it's solid, it's solid. And it doesn't really matter. People will find a way. You don't have to just be always trash at video games. And the folks that say, well, this is not my time, I don't want to allocate the resources to learn how to play it, they simply won't play it. So you can cater to the people that are going to play the game, or you can cater to people that may sip a little Bud Ice before they go to a club, get 20 minutes of gameplay and because you want to give them something to play, then you try to make the game cater towards their experience. That can be a recipe for disaster. We've seen it many times before. We've discussed those. I disagree. These games need to be as accessible as possible. Your accessibility is being able to buy it and be able to customize it to have you play, but we haven't experienced it. We have an experience that we want you to have, and the game is centered around that, not trying to give different players the different experiences. And I'm not talking about like in an RPG sense. I'm saying that, well, this person only plays the games for 20 minutes. This person plays games for hours upon hours, and I'm trying to make it for everybody. Well, yeah, you can make it for everybody and make it bad for everybody too. Wherever you're viewing the content, I appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, you may be interested in my comic book company, Rippaverse Comics. Our first book and campaign, ISOM #1, brought in $3.7 million with tens of thousands of satisfied customers. Visit Rippaverse.com to check out our store and stay up to date with the latest campaigns from one of the hottest new comic book companies. Also, my first big step towards a parallel economy was the development of my personal website, ericdjuly.com. This entirely replaced my Patreon. Now, if you enjoy this content, please consider becoming a member over at the website. We have an ever-expanding list of perks for various membership tiers, a forum, and a phone app. Some of these perks will even benefit you if you're fans of the Rippaverse. Anyway, I appreciate you so much for being a supporter and or customer. I even got a little love for my haters.